This is the 46 of 46 podcast summit session, where we'll talk all things Adirondack, backcountry, and beyond. From high peak stories and adventures to trail tips and tricks, we'll dive deep into the heart of these mountains and the people who passionately climb them. Adirondack maps and spruce traps to bushwhacks and backpacks. It's all here on the 46 of 46 summit sessions. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 46 of 46 podcast. Spring has sprung here in the ADK. Though temperatures are rising, the snow is gone, the grass is getting greener, the forests are green. You see the dirt on the trail as you're out in the woods. It is just a fantastic time of year. And with that comes hiking in shorts, climbing mountains in t-shirts, and fishing. So today I have Jordan Ross coming on the show with me to talk about his organization called Trout Power, which enlists the power of anglers to protect, restore, and enhance native brook trout populations and habitats across their native range, with a large focus on right here in the ADK Park. I love what Jordan's doing. He is going to be a plethora of information all about trout fishing, habitat, tactics, and all sorts of stuff for your use right here in the Adirondack Park. If you're not into fishing, I highly recommend continuing to listen to this episode, because we're going to talk all about conservation and efforts you can use to just protect the habitats that you love and enjoy, which is the Adirondack Park, because that's why you're here on the podcast. So without further ado, Jordan Ross, thank you for coming on the 46 of 46 podcast, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. It will be very fun to talk angling with someone here on the podcast, because I like to explore everything that you can do in the outdoors. And I always say, like, of course, this show started as a hiking show, but I am the type of person that does a million different things outdoors. Just this show in particular kind of started as a hiking podcast. So it's great to, have different conversation about different outdoors adventures and different things that people and myself like to do in the outdoors. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you today. So before we get into, the organization that you work with and what you're doing, just give us a little background about yourself, Jordan. How'd you get into the outdoors? What's your connection with the Adirondacks, and how did this ultimately, move you into even starting an organization?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm 46 years old, and my parents had always had like a 1 week vacation, sometimes 2 week vacation that we would do up in Eagle Bay. Just outside of just near Old Forge. And I think that is where I kind of like started to get so connected to the Adirondacks. And that turned into them getting a camp, which meant we would be up there like every weekend. It was a big investment for my folks. So I would be up there, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And we'd be up there. It's funny, you were just talking about mud season the other day. And I loved, and I still do love this time of year. I remember going up and never realizing what vernal pools were until I got older. But when I was a kid, I would see these pools fill up with eggs from salamanders and frogs and stuff. And so I think it grew on me, and it's a part of me. I've often thought about leaving, and, just like in a river runs through it, when the brother asks the other brother, do you want to move with me to Chicago? And Paulie says, I'll never leave Montana. And I feel like I don't know if I could leave the Adirondacks, James. It's tough.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I know the feeling very well.
So in regards to my life, as you mentioned, I founded this organization called Trout Power. I know we're going to talk about that. I also have a fly rod company, which specializes in small stream fly fishing. And I've been doing that for 25 years. So I started that when I was 20 years old in 1997.
That's fantastic. So you started that company. So let's hear a little bit more about that. So clearly, for you to have a love for something and a passion for something so much to even start your own company, especially at 20 years old, congratulations to you. I commend you for your entrepreneurial spirit. What led you to wanting to start an actual company?
I still love fly fishing. I love fly fishing a lot. Then I think there was a stigma back then, which was like a little bit after that movie I quoted came out, Rip Runs Through It came out, that the industry was kind of like starting to boom a little bit, and I kind of wanted to do it because I was young and I kind of wanted to prove that I could do it. And I didn't realize it then, James, but I know now that what I really wanted to do was to get people outside and get people out fishing. I didn't realize that my real addiction was trying to give something to people that they could have forever. And I even say on our website that, our fly rods won't make you happy. They will haunt you to go outside, and that will make you happy. It's these, right now in this commercial industry, happiness is kind of this God-sized hole that can't be filled with things, right? I mean, everyone's kind of in search of happiness. And I think that it's easy to experience happy times when you're outside and exploring.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And the reason I asked that too is because, as someone who I have a podcast and, I obviously I spend so much time dedicated to what we do outdoors, but then bringing it to other people. So that's why I asked you to go further on the fact that you started a company. Anytime that somebody does something above and beyond just actually recreating, there's always a bigger picture to it. And that's why I asked you that, because, for me, it's like with the podcast, I want to bring this park and these mountains and the outdoors to people when they're not here. I want to bring it to them because that's how much I love it. And, we obviously are very like-minded in that regard. So I wanted to hear the backstory there. And I have the same kind of mission in the sense of I want to get you outside because I know what that has done for my own life. And I want to share it with other people too, because I know just the difference between a life spent outdoors and a life not. And we clearly have similar missions in that regard. So let's talk a little bit now real quick. Introduce us to Trout Power and exactly what it is, what it does, and tell us the background about that and where most of your work is done.
Sure. So Trout Power is a 501c3 nonprofit, and that was founded as a citizen science group. And I created the concept of Trout Power and founded it. But as in anything, it's about the people and the team. And our idea with Trout Power really was that we wanted to change the world. The initial mission statement was to change the world by honoring clean water, not by its clarity, but by the wild fish that live in it. And those words were chosen creatively and specifically, and you will know this more than anybody, is the water in the Adirondacks is not clear often, is it? It is usually tannic and tea stained. But the truth is, if you take a bottle of tea-stained Adirondack water and you put it next to a bottle of drinking water, and you ask somebody which one is more pure or more clean, so to speak, right? It's kind of a rhetorical question. They probably are going to choose the clear one that has trace, chlorine and other things in it. And for us, we wanted to bring kind of a new perspective on wild fish that are sustaining themselves in water, in streams, specifically in their Adirondacks, and using that as the metric to determine that stream is valuable or is a baseline habitat for whatever it might be. Maybe it's acid rain. Lately, it seems to be climate change and dissolved oxygen is the big issue. We can talk about that if you want to digress. But so the mission of the organization was we would go and we would find these brook trout in these streams. And there are so many streams in the Adirondacks that have brook trout. And for your listeners, pretty much if it's a fairly cold stream most of the year, you're probably going to find brook trout on it. It's a great time in our lives to go catch brook trout in the Adirondacks. But I'll stay on the mission. The whole point was we would go catch these fish, and people would say, "Oh, that's wild, that's native, that's this, that's that." And the only way that you could determine that really was genetics. There are stocked fish, and there are hybrid fish, which are stocked fish that breed with wild fish, and then there are wild fish, which are fish that are reproducing by themselves. Take, for example, the brown trout in New York State is a non-native trout. Brown trout actually came from Europe, so they are not even native to the United States. But brown trout can live in a stream and sustain and populate and spawn successfully, and they would be wild. Native wild is like the holy grail. That's fish that are native to the habitat. They have been there for a long time, since the glaciers receded, and they are self-sustaining. What we did is, again, I think it was the mentality of getting people rallied and having this prove it mentality. And what better thing to do that is difficult and expensive to put yourself in a niche than genetics? So we decided that we were going to take tissue samples of fish in the Adirondacks. We were going to get in touch with a geneticist, which happened to be Dr. Spencer Bruce of the New York State Museum. And we did genetic analysis, microsatellite analysis of these fish. And we have been part of discovering over 50 new strains of wild brook trout in New York. These fish go all the way from the Adirondacks to the Allegheny region. And I can say that with a lot of confidence because of the genetic work. And all you need is a tiny little piece of tissue. If you can see that tissue in that little bottle of ether, that's enough to get the genetics of these fish. So you can take a tiny little fin clip, tiny little fin clip off of even a brook trout that's 4 inches long, and get genetic data from that. And that's what we do. And then we couple that with working with the New York State DEC and with their fisheries biologists, and try to understand a little bit more about this. My original goal on this was to consider if the Adirondack Park and inside the blue line could be considered a brook trout preserve. Mm-hmm. What I realized very quickly was the golden cup of this whole thing, the golden thread, was the people. Having the people work together and be excited about doing conservation and doing genetic work, being citizen scientists, that ended up being the most powerful thing so far in my conservation and outdoor life. That's been my biggest joy. I can't say accomplishment because it's the group, it's the people that rallied. I'm thankful that they looked to me as their leader for a while. Now we have a new president, Chris Murphy, who is awesome, and we have a board of directors, which are also terrific. But I can always say that I was the founder, and I love that, and I love seeing these people just be so excited about getting bit up by black flies and going through spruce traps and going into these horrible mm-hmm. adventures to catch a fish and take a tissue sample and then love that fish and love that stream. And I actually think that that's the future of conservation, James, is that if we find these strains and the people that fish them and the people that love them because they have a name for that strain, I think that it's easier to get people to rally. And that was one of the things that I discussed with the New York State DEC, because they were like, well, what's the big deal? You know, if it's wild, it's wild. And I said, yes, you're going to manage it because it's wild. And we appreciate that you have a new trout stream management plan that designates between wild and stocked. However, people, the human element, wants to have a visceral and emotional connection to a stream that they feel like is theirs, their home waters, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So when we find these fish and we find out that they're native and wild, and literally that those fish have been there for 15,000 years since the glaciers receded, they have been surviving through acid rain. You know, they thankfully humans did something right and did the Clean Air Act, which for sure was a turning point in pH levels in the Adirondacks. They lived through that. And now here they are living through climate change. And my hypothesis is some of these strains are going to die because of drastic climate change. And without doing the citizen science work, you won't have a baseline to know where they were and why some lived and some didn't through climate change, which is why we are investing a lot of money. Trout Power is investing a ton of money into genome research on brook trout that will be shared with the world, with biologists, globally. So
That's great.
Sorry,
And
sorry for a winded answer.
No, I love it. I mean, it's a podcast, right? No, that's great. And it's starting all right here in the ADK, which is cool. And I love that even on your logo, you have citizen science, and that's clearly, it's a foundational, principle or core value or whatever you might want to call it of the organization. And, that's that goes exactly along with what, when I'm talking on this show about how, you have to take care of the places you love. People complain all the time. Let's take a trail, analogy. People complain when there's garbage on the trail. And I say, yes, it sucks. It's unfortunate, but you're going to pick it up because you care more about this land than you do about picking, someone's trash or being annoyed about them. So you pull double, you do double duty because the land deserves it. And I love that that's what you're doing. And that's what you're encouraging other people, as you say, citizen science, to, get involved in the places you love and the things you love to do. And that comes with passion that, you're just not going to get if, someone's having to do something as a chore. So I think that's a really neat, element to your organization. So what is your, I guess, other than you're doing the research, I guess, what's the, let's call it a perfect world. Let's say in a perfect world, you're writing the Hollywood script, what's kind of the end game of the work that you guys are doing?
Well, so what does success look like, right, in regards to conservation and stuff? And I think the answer is it's convincing leaders in politics and in the world to do the right thing for our planet. And I think we all realize now that, the answer is going to be balance, right? Mm-hmm. And the answer to almost everything is some hybrid solution, right? And when it comes to, EV mobility and diet and all this stuff, it's usually a hybrid of different things. So to kind of theoretically answer your question, the concept would be we have data where regular people, regular anglers, men and women and kids are getting data to use that data to influence people to make a difference. And I've said this on my own podcast with some other people that it's too general, in my opinion. I'm going to get a little terse here. It's too general to think like, well, we're just going to teach our kids and teach the next generation to, be good or whatever, and kind of vanilla. And I look at leaders. I think that we have to have leaders, children now that become leaders for the world, for conservation, have to be people, in my opinion, that resemble, let's say, Teddy Roosevelt, that in the board meeting, in the boardroom, in the White House, somebody says, I'll give you an example, in a corporation, somebody says, well, we're just going to add 0.5% to the bottom line contribution, we're just going to throw out these scraps that we have. And it turns out it's better for us to just put them in the dumpster than it is to try to reprocess them. That leader that stands up and slams his hand on the table and says, are you crazy that we're going to put this stuff in the dumpster for 0.5% added profit? That's not what we're going to do. We're going to spend a little bit more to make sure that we are responsibly handling this, this waste. And the reason I say that is because there needs to be more and more people that are just going to get passionate and charismatic, that are leaders in what they do and in these businesses and in corporations and stuff, to do the right thing. And I think that a lot of it it's not just the young generation, although of course the young generation matters. I think that there are people that will be in Trout Power and in other organizations that will go back to their life and will act differently because of something that you've given them in regards to caring about the environment. So it's about how you motivate people through conservation that they actually do something different in their real life. Because a lot of people wear two hats. I hate to tell you, James, but there are people I fish with that have very, very big influential power, and they don't really use it when they could. They're like your buddy to go fishing, and then you're like, look at this stuff. Like, don't you think we should get this changed, get this fixed? And I don't know if they go back to their big corporate boardroom and do that type of stuff. So I'm sorry, I get a little bit emotional about it because I just think a lot of people just turn their head. and they have a chance to do better.
No, the passion is evident, and I love it because that's what you care about, and what everyone should care about. And I think you really hit the nail on the head when you talked about, being too vanilla, and quite frankly, vanilla people don't change the world. You need charismatic, you need people with the passion and the fire. That is what it is, and that is what you're mentioning, instilling in the next generation to care about the land around us. And I think you're doing fantastic stuff. So take me through, okay, so let's talk now. Let's take a scenario and let's say you have somebody who doesn't ever fish, doesn't necessarily care about fishing, loves the outdoors, but doesn't have an investment in fishing. Why should they care about what your organization is doing? Take us through, the bigger picture of everything, and then what it also represents, and then how, why this is good information to have. That's what I'd love to hear.
So this is easy. This is easy. Which way does water flow? Upriver, uphill, or downhill?
Down.
Yeah. Well, so does poop.
There it is.
So the Adirondacks essentially is like the closest. These high elevation places are where you have the most potential for the cleanest, purest water. So you want to try to keep that at that level of cleanliness. First of all, if the water's coming down out of the sky and it's in bad shape right out of the sky, it's not the mountain's fault, right?
Sure.
So the Clean Air Act, for example, where we suppressed a lot of these pollutants so that we reduced acid rain. First of all, that changed the baseline of the water up in the mountains. Okay. And then you try to keep that water as at the same level or same purity, whatever metric you want to use, as it goes down, towards the ocean, because it's all going to flow towards the ocean, right? And the ocean's a whole nother story. But if you're anything like me, you probably also read about microplastics in the ocean, and you almost want to. It's like you need to take medication because you get depressed.
Yes.
But
microplastics in all of our food as well.
Oh, it's horrible. So to answer your question, why? So for people that are not actually into fishing, you usually can get them respectful of water. And there's an old saying that if trout live in it, you can probably drink it. That's not necessarily true, obviously, but trout don't necessarily live in bad water. So they're a metric for good, clean water, like a canary in a coal mine, so to speak, right? And there are a lot of things also, by the way, in the Adirondacks that are good measures of the ecosystem. And amphibians are another great example. And again, it's associated with water. So these upper streams, these little streams, these places where these brook trout are that are nurseries and stuff, they're really important. And this is why I think I focus my fly rod company around small stream experiences. It's not so much about the fly rods that we make, it's about the experiences of being on these small streams. And I don't know about you, and I love fishing in the Keys, and I love fishing on ponds and stuff, but I think it's human nature that you have a little bit of anxiety when you're out in the open. I think that's genetic. So when we get like down into these little streams and stuff, and we're kind of like nestled in and nuzzled in, we feel more at home, a little bit more safe. You can jump to the other side, wade to the other side. You can explore really easily. So these small streams, I have seen it, are captivating to people that have not spent a lot of time in the outdoors. Then you start flipping over rocks and you start seeing stoneflies and hellgrammites and mayflies, and you learn about all these things. To the layman, it doesn't matter what the bugs are and that their Latin scientific names. The point is you see bugs, that's a good thing. And you start teaching these people these things and experiencing this. This is one of the reasons that more often I find myself turning over rocks with my kids in streams and looking for bugs and amphibians than I do fishing, because their curiosity, they just love these things. They love these slimy, crawly, creepy little things. And the truth is those weird things are all part of an important ecosystem. So you can do that with people. You get them on these little streams and stuff, and they see these new, there's more life in a square meter in the Adirondacks. It's crazy. There's probably 10 different species of mushrooms and all these different plants. Start flipping stuff over, and you find insects and all these different things. It's amazing. It's just amazing. So people get energy out of it, and then you got to harness that. All right. You got to try to keep that going as long as you can.
Absolutely. And, when you instill curiosity, it always snowballs. It always gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Very rarely do you find something of interest and then slowly start to, lose interest in it, because the more you dig, I like when people talk about rabbit holes, the further you go. It's the same way when you start to see what is outside, and when you start talking about ecosystems. So like, we homeschool our kids, so we learn a lot about, the world from helping teach our kids. And so I know firsthand, like, the more you learn these little bits of information, it just becomes more interesting and interesting and interesting. And then you realize, man, I am so small in this crazy world around us. And it's funny what you mentioned about there's being more land or more, life in a square meter in the Adirondacks than anywhere, seemingly like that. And I cannot explain to you how much I find that to be the case once you start. So I've been reading this like foraging book, right? So it's like, once you start learning about plants, holy crap, the amount of things that you start to learn and see. And it's like, when you're talking about bugs, these bugs go to these plants, and these plants are eaten by this, and then this goes over here. And it just really, it's truly mind boggling. Oh, yeah. And it's like, as I mentioned, it snowballs, and it's a fascinating thing to learn about the world around us, especially the world in the outdoors.
Oh yeah. And to anyone out there that is into photography and loves going outside, the lens you want to buy is a macro lens. You buy a macro lens and get down on your digital SLR, get down on your hands and knees and start taking pictures on the ground looking through that macro lens. You'd be amazed of the complexity and the beauty of what's going on at a small level. I'm not talking microscopic. I'm just talking, you throw on a 60 millimeter macro and start looking at flowers and bugs and things. And it's amazing. It's amazing. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So,
the world.
Course, I mean, I'm a fly fisherman, right? So like I love bugs and I can't help it. So
it's funny because, fly fishermen, exactly what you're saying, bugs represent, that's a good place to be going fishing. Whereas like anyone who's walking on a trail will say, oh my God, it's black fly season, kill me. Or, people hiking the Northville Placid Trail, oh, the bugs are out, it's so terrible. But actually, you actually have really nice water all around you, hence the bugs living in those neighborhoods. Which is why, I always mention to people when they are hiking the Northville Placid Trail, hey, you should bring a fishing rod with you, because a lot of great places to stop and enjoy yourself. Let's talk now about like places to fish and tactics for fly fishing here in the Adirondack Park. Obviously, that's a big part of what you're doing and what you do for fun and, for this organization. What are you've mentioned to me that the high peaks is a totally different animal than, where you are in the, the Western Adirondacks. So take me through and inform my listeners on a little bit about some background about fly fishing. Maybe someone has no idea about what fly fishing is. So just give us a little quick education on that.
Okay. All right. Well, I have to protect my family, so I can't give too many places away.
Of course.
But so I did say that to you about the high peaks versus like I consider myself in the Western or Western Central, whatever region 5, region 6, right? And if you look at the DEC map, the thing about the high peaks is that there is more, if you geologically, if you look at the area in the high peaks region, there's more land that is a extreme gradient than there is I guess stream drain offs and ponds, vlais, bogs, stuff like that. The geology up your way is doing so much still in regards to the lifespan of those mountains eroding, that they're still pretty younger. And of course, geologically speaking, the Adirondacks are still wicked old compared to other places in the United States. But the reason I'm saying this is, if you go to a place that's a little bit more, that has less mountains, a little bit more rolly hills, you'll find that there's usually like more streams, more ponds, more water, and stuff like that. Now, this is only from my own opinion. I love saying stuff so someone can prove me wrong. The streams up there are usually moving wicked fast, and they dump their water pretty quick. So the chances of finding fish can be tough sometimes. So, but once you get down a little bit lower, like I will tell you, like my buddy Evan that owns the Hungry Trout Fly Shop, he has a great business teaching people about the ecosystems and stuff through ice fishing and fishing the Au Sable. He's got a great team of guides, and I know a lot of them, and think that's a wonderful place. And I would never even start to kind of set foot trying to capitalize on what guides and stuff in the high peaks have learned. Because if you're successful fishing in the high peaks area, I think it's because you've done your homework, and it's a tough place to find fish and be consistent. So I have it a little bit easier where I am around the Fulton Chain and Stillwater Reservoir and Racket Lake. There's a lot of water, and just about everywhere has brook trout in it, and definitely everywhere has fish in it. So to people getting into fishing, if all you want to do is catch a fish, pretty much anywhere you go in the Adirondacks that has water, you're going to catch fish. It's not like places are dead, like they were in the 80s and early 90s where we did have dead water. It's not as bad as it was then. So I don't know. Ask me another question on getting started. I feel like I'm losing my train of thought.
That's all right. I was just going to say, like, take someone through what is fly fishing, what separates fly fishing from regular fishing. Take us through just a little like introduction to fly fishing, because we know that that's kind of where your expertise lies. That's a big part of Trout Power. So if someone listening, we've hit the conservation stuff. So now let's talk about what is fly fishing specifically.
Sure. So when you fly cast, and you are casting the fly itself, and the fly is this stuff that is tied to a hook. When you conventionally fish, conventionally cast, the lure is the weight. You throw the lure, the sinker, whatever, that thing gets catapulted and it pulls the line out of the reel. When you fly cast, you're casting the line. You're putting the line in motion. The line has energy, because it's thicker. That's why you can see that fly line in the air and looks kind of pretty. A lot of people think that's kind of majestic. The reason for that is because it's fairly lightweight, but it's still thicker. So you can get energy into that line, so it can carry the fly behind it, and the fly turns over and lands on the water. So the casting part is kind of the fun part. And the rods are made to cast the line. Therefore, the rods tend to be a little bit more flexible. They tend to be a little bit more longer. The act of casting takes more time. You don't just like push a button and fling this thing out. You got to kind of think about what you're going to do before you do it. So you got this deliberate action thing going on where you're like, okay, I'm going to try to get the fly line over there so that my fly goes over there. And I got to look behind me and see where my back cast is going to go. That it sounds like a lot of work, but the truth is the busyness of the mind is very therapeutic. So, and when you begin to develop muscle memory from casting, all that time that you spent thinking about what to do, how to cast, that void doesn't fill in. It's just open. It's an amazing thing. It doesn't fill in with other stuff. It's just like a sponge. So, you want to fly fish enough if you can, so that you get to the point where you don't have to think too much about the casting. And then when you do, it's like this whole other world of being outside. You tend to hear birds more, you hear the wind, you look at the water, even just walking and having the sound change because you came around a point and now you can hear water differently. All of this stuff becomes very real. And the cool thing about fly fishing for brook trout in the Adirondacks is all you have to do is flip the fly line downstream. That's all you have to do is roll cast downstream and have that fly drag in the water, and then you can just pull it back up with your hand and you just drag it through the stream. And if there's a brook trout there, they probably will bite it. This is not that hard. And I will tell you more often than not, that's it. You just have to be aware of where you are, that you're not sending a lot of silt or making the water dirty. You're not flipping over rocks to make a lot of noise. and you're aware of your shadow. And that in and of itself is cool because now you're like kind of stalking. So now you got this, this visceral kind of like back to hunting thing that comes out of your genetics, which I believe also is euphoric. And you start, thinking about what you're doing, and then boom, you catch a fish, and it's like awesome. It's really great. It's all about the experience. I rarely remember the fish I caught. I always remember the experience of catching them. So it's not about the fish.
Mm-hmm. The fish, though, becomes a very addicting quality of the activity, though, real quick. For anyone that goes fishing, it's like, they don't want to go, and then they catch their first fish, and suddenly they're like, oh, this is interesting. And then it becomes, it quickly grabs people. And I say the same thing with, in terms of when you climb a mountain, you get to the summit, and you say, I see why people do this. I see why people put themselves in these situations, or, go through this work to get this or to catch the fish. Like, the reward, it's the reward. But also too, when it comes to fishing, and as I say, anything outdoors, the actual journey itself, being out there, the smells, the sounds, as we were talking earlier, the ecosystems that exist around you, it's all why the great outdoors is indeed the great outdoors. It's all part of the equation.
Yeah, for sure. I have talked to a number of anglers about the brook trout in the Adirondacks right now. And we actually, Scott Daskowitz is a friend of mine, and he turned this phrase saying that it's the new golden age of brook trout fishing right now, which it is, because we're before drastic climate change, we're after the Clean Air Act, and pH levels are now really good. And the brook trout fishing is phenomenal. It is just awesome. So the only thing I would tell people is I don't have any issues with taking a fish to eat it on a campfire and all that stuff. All I would say is if you want to grab a fish to sustain, that's awesome. But if you want this to last, then use good judgment and good ethics in regards to harvesting fish. But this is a great time, James, to fish for trout in the Adirondacks. Great time.
So let's say somebody listening wanted to get into fishing. Does your organization provide anything like that, or what do you tell people that say, hey, I want to try fly fishing, or maybe just regular fishing and not fly fishing? What do you say? How do you get someone started?
So Trout Power does not do that. In fact, we've debated on whether we want to do anything like that, and we have consciously said no. We are, we're an organization for anglers that have a little bit more experience. And we send them out on missions. I mean, to be honest with you, James, you would love this, because it's like we're blue lining. We don't have a trail. We got to set a course. We know when you're supposed to be back. We say, like, if you're not back after such and such a time, we are coming to find you. Like, this is real. Safety is important. And a lot of people like those missions and they like those adventures. So that's what Trout Power is about. If you want to get into it, there's a ton of stuff, obviously, on the internet, specifically YouTube, that is how to. I kind of sponsor two people. One of them is Blue Line Outfitters, is a YouTube channel. I can get you the link for those guys. The other one is White Dog Outdoors, and they have a lot of how-to videos. And then the other thing you could do is, if you can afford it, I love trying to help out guides, specifically in the Adirondacks, with their lifestyle and throwing them a bone and going on a trip. And the only thing I would tell you is, if you get a guide and you want to learn, tell them that you want to learn. Don't make them believe that you have the skill, because that will make for a bad day. Find a guide that can teach you. And many of them will. And if they know that that's what you're going to do, they'll take you to catch, sunfish, rock bass, smallmouth, largemouth, something like that, before you start going for trout. But they'll get you on fish, and you'll learn a year's worth of stuff in 6 hours with a good guide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, it's kind of like, you want to learn something new. Let's say you're on the internet, you might pay for a book, you might buy this, you might buy that. Sometimes when it comes to learning something new, it's worth, especially in the outdoors, it's worth hiring a guide for that exact reason. It's like, yeah, if it costs a couple $100, but what about if you have an entire day where you have one-on-one with someone literally teaching you exactly what you want to do? Or like, let's say you're climbing a mountain, you have someone one-on-one to answer all your outdoors hiking questions, to show you exactly what to look for on the trail, to take you up there, to not literally hold your hand, but maybe sometimes literally hold your hand. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that. And I'm a huge advocate of, if I want to learn something, I will pay for it, because I care about learning these things. And with guides in particular, whether you're hunting, whether you're fishing, whether you're climbing mountains, you're rock climbing, there's all these different things you can do that when you hire someone, you get unbelievable tutelage that you wouldn't otherwise get, unless you're into, maybe some people are into the YouTube, searching for hours and hours. In fact, that's why I wrote the book that I wrote about climbing the high peaks, is because I'm the type of person that I'm very direct and I want the exact information. So that's why I put that book together. You could scour the internet, but you could also hire a guide and get all the information much more direct and much more thorough. I'm a big supporter of hiring guides. It's not just because I am a licensed guide, but I see the value in it, quite frankly. And especially for something like fishing, it could be one of those activities where if you kind of just learn on your own time without anyone instructing you, it's very likely you will be very unsuccessful. And therefore you won't catch the fish. You won't be successful, which is what causes the addiction to starter. You don't get to see the reward. And I think the reward is really what captures people. It's like, imagine if all you did was hike, climb mountains, but every time right before you got to the summit, you just turned around. It wouldn't really grab you. It wouldn't captivate you. And I think that's a good benefit to hire a guide if you want to get into fishing, to, bring it back to our original question.
Oh yeah. And you'll get individual diagnosis too of potentially bad technique.
Absolutely. Which is priceless, really. When
wicked.
They're saying right to you, here's what you could use to work, help you with. And it's worth the money.
Yep. It's the slope of the learning curve, right? So, it's going to be pretty drastic. And the truth is that time period it takes with a slope that's not quite as steep, you'll learn so much. It'll be real steep in a short amount of time, but then what you'll have a foundation that will help you further. And I like what you said about, you're right. It's about the reward, right? Of catching the fish, of reaching the peak, all that stuff. And your chances of hitting that reward with a specialist, your chances are pretty high. And your chances of enjoying the experience and having it last longer are also pretty high if you go with somebody like that. So, yeah.
Yes. And as you said, it is now the golden age of trout fishing. I like that phrase. It definitely makes it more intriguing and interesting for someone listening to be like, oh, maybe I'm going to give this a go now. And if fishing's not on your radar, I highly recommend checking it out. So let me ask you this question. I like to ask this to people, and this is a nod to my buddy Paul from Aptitude Outdoors, who asks this to his people on his podcast a lot, especially with people fishing. If I were to blindfold you, drop you, put you in a helicopter, bring you somewhere in the Adirondack Park, and just drop you there, and you get down to this lake, and right next to that lake is a Walmart. That's all that's there, you and a Walmart, and all that's at Walmart is a couple things in the fishing section. You can go to Walmart, get whatever you need to go fishing. What are you buying to go catch a fish? You don't know where you are. You don't know anything about, this lake. You only have Walmart next door and the lake. You're going to go to Walmart. You're going to get a fishing pole, fishing rod, lures, etc. What are you buying, and what are you buying just to catch a fish? So this would give anybody who is thinking about getting into fishing the most basic introduction, entry level. You want to catch a fish? Here's what you need to go catch a fish. What would you be buying?
This is easy.
Hit me.
I would get a push button casting fly rod or a fishing rod, not a fly rod. Obviously the line and stuff, right? The little kit that has the push button thing on it. And then I would get a yellow jig head Mr. Twister, like the lead head that has the lead head jig head. Then you put the yellow grub thing on with a little curlicue tail. It'd be if they said, okay, you can get one more color, I would get white.
All right.
That's what I would get. And I would bring that back and I'd push that button and cast out, and I would have a ton of confidence.
And what would that cost you, do you think? at Walmart or any other fishing place?
$30.
$30. There it is. The cost of entry into getting into fishing and catching a fish, sub $50. Can't really beat that. It's a not expensive meal out these days, quite frankly.
Yep. Don't drop it. But yeah.
No, I asked that question because I already kind of had a rough idea of the answer here, but I asked that question because I think it's a point worth making, that the cost of entry to something like fishing and hiking is very low. It's very low. Obviously, paddling, canoeing, you have to have the boat, the oars, etc. That sort of thing is a bit more expensive. Hunting, much more expensive, but like fishing really is, there's a reason you'll see, every like old TV show or commercial on television you used to see from the 80s would have a kid on his bicycle riding to the river to go fishing. Like it is a low cost of entry, and there's a high reward to it, and it gets you outdoors. It gets you gets you invested in the area and the land that you're recreating on.
The thing I would say to that too is, and I hope I'd like your opinion on this. Okay. There's so much more to it in regards to thinking about what you're going to do. Okay. It's not just yes, you're right. And go to the Walmart, get the rod, go back. And now if you put all of the faith of success on that thing, you're going to suck. Okay. You got this thing, and now you got to go, okay, I'm going to use my brain. The best tool you have is yourself and your brain. So now you think, okay, where should I go? Should I go on this? Let me go on this point. And that way I can cast all the way around. I'll get like maybe 200 degrees of fan casting, and I'll have way more places to cast. Well, where's the wind? Well, the wind is coming at my face. Well, okay, that's going to help me decide where to go. Rely on your brain as a tool. That is, to me, I don't know how you feel about that, right? Like, just because you have the gear and stuff, don't get me wrong. Gear, listen, I sell gear, okay? But people have to realize they got to get their head in the right spot when they do something. Do you agree with me? Oh,
I am. It's funny you say that. The person I mentioned earlier, Paul from Aptitude Outdoors podcast, him and I have this conversation all the time because the two of us we're not gear nuts in anything we do. And you see so much in today's kind of like outdoors culture, gear, and, in the hunting world, camo, there's all these aesthetic things that are just so like, it seems like people are all about that as opposed to all about, well, why don't you instead read a book to actually learn the habitat of where to go, learn the technique. And it goes back to like gear is a very small part of the equation, but learning the actual ropes is significantly more important. And I would 100% agree with what you're saying, obviously. And that's why one of the reasons I asked you that first question is because I wanted to show like it doesn't take a lot to get into it, but from there, now you start to learn those other things that you were talking about, as opposed to like, well, let's say I don't know anything and this costs, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars just to dip my toes in. Well, actually you can dip your toes in for very cheap, and you can start to experience it. And from there, because I am a firm believer in the great outdoors will show you why it's great. And once you're out there doing it, you will be hooked. Pardon the pun. Actually, don't pardon the pun. Use the pun. You will be hooked. Because I think that those, using your brain and learning habitat, learning techniques, learning what matters, and understanding those things are far more important than the gear. If you were to give somebody, $1,000 worth of fantastic fishing gear, and you would give someone who's done this your whole life, the $30 pole from Walmart, my money's on you. My money's on you, as opposed to the person with the real fancy gear who doesn't have the experience. And I think there's something to be said about that.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So yes, I would say that my brain and your brain are right, kind of on par with each other in that regard. But so let's take real quick as we're going to start to wrap things up here. But going back to Trout Power, let's say somebody wants to get involved. What do they do to do that? What do you offer? What do you mentioned, you're doing citizen science. You guys are out there doing work. What does that actually look like? Like, how does one get involved?
Okay. So you can go to troutpower.org and you can buy a sticker. You can become a member if you want to. That's one thing you would do. And then automatically you're essentially going to be in the loop on stuff. You can sign up for the newsletter. But the best thing to do, if you're interested in doing something like I mentioned earlier, which is you want to be part of a mission and you want to be part of an adventure to try to do something, then you email us. You go online, you take the time, and you write something that, just says that you want to do something and where you are and maybe where you fish or where you frequent. And Chris or Ryan or myself or somebody will get back to you and start a conversation. So we're not huge, it's not like, we're not like the Red Cross or something like that, where, it's just a few of us. And that individualism of just like sending a message is probably the best way to go. Old fashioned as it might sound. I wish we had a phone you could call, which would be great to talk. But, look at you and I, right? Like we're talking on here and I feel like I know you so much better. So when you get together with other anglers, the experience is really great because the socialization is awesome in regards to your confidence and learning, and then you have these memories and stuff like that. So I would urge everybody to please help us out. It's expensive to do this genetic work, so we'd love to have the help. If you feel empowered and you want to be around a group that wants to do good, and you actually do want to catch a fish and take a tissue sample and know that tissue sample is going to turn into genetic science, then email us.
There it is. I love it. Now, as we've wrapped things up, I like to ask the guests on the Summit Sessions the same 3 questions. So I'll ask you as well. First, and I'll gear this towards fishing. I always say, like, what's something unique that you need in your backpack when you go hiking or you're going in the woods? For you, what is something unique that you always take with you whenever you go into the woods, whether it's fishing or doing something else? What's something unique that you like to have? And there's no wrong answer. This is just a fun question.
That's okay. So I have had a little bit of a battle with melanoma. So I always have a buff. So it's great because if the bugs are bad, I can kind of like pull it over my head. If the sun is coming out and I'm worried about, kind of cooking, whatever, I usually always have like 1 or 2 of those things. They're also great from a safety reason. If you get caught or anything, they're kind of like a handkerchief. You could use them as a tourniquet if you needed to. So I would say you can wear it, but I'd say a buff.
All right. Very cool. Well, not very cool about the reason why you have to have it, but very cool in the sense of, yes, you are taking care of that. And second question, what, in your opinion, makes the Adirondacks a unique place?
I can answer this for sure in regards to asking this question myself. I've traveled the world quite a bit for work, and the change in scenery in the Adirondacks and the constant lushness of the Adirondacks, to me, is what makes it unique. Whether it's a bog or a pine forest or hardwoods or whatever, the scenery to me changes often, and it is always lush. I just love the greenness. I love the water. There's always water. And where there's water, there's life. And that's what I love about it. I haven't done a ton of stuff in all the national parks. I visited a lot of them. I will say Yellowstone, probably Yellowstone, Yosemite, but Yellowstone more than anything. Yellowstone is the most reminiscent in regards to the changing of the scenery and how I love that. Mm-hmm. But it's just super freaking crowded.
Yeah.
So,
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. And, I've had so many people who come from out west come here and climb and shoot me a message about like, hey, where should I go hiking or blah, blah, blah. I'm from Utah or I'm from, Idaho, whatever. And then they'll message me back again and say, man, I didn't realize how green it was until I came here. And I said, yeah, we get a lot of rain here. That's probably why it's very lush. But yeah, and then they'll also comment about the amount of water. I mean, it's really what makes this place so unique is the lakes and streams. I think the mountains overshadow, again, pardon the pun, the lakes and the rivers, but like the water life that you have here, mm-hmm. Outdoor recreation on the water is abundant, very much so.
The other thing too, I'll tell you is it's not that dangerous in regards to like, you're not going to come across a lot of poisonous things or, things that want to bite you and stuff like that. I've got some friends of mine that are coming off from Georgia and to fish. We've got a Trout Power weekend coming up in May. And I said, you guys you could literally like stick your hand down a hole up here and you're probably going to get like a slug. Like, there's no freaking way I'm doing that in the Smokies or in Georgia. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I do know.
So I feel a lot of confidence. I like being able to walk through stuff, even with just pants on. And other than ticks, I will say, let me make this little plug here too. My wife has late stage Lyme disease, and it was dormant for a while. I will tell everybody, ticks ticks and Lyme disease are an issue. Like it's becoming an issue all over the place. But 2 days of doxycycline after a tick bite will absolutely rid you of any chance of getting Lyme disease. So just go to urgent care and get your doxycycline. But other than that, I would say ticks are the only thing that kind of worry me.
No, they're worth being worried about.
Yeah. I mean, I won't worry about leeches. I don't worry about, small snakes and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I think the only thing that I will say, I think the most dangerous animal in the Adirondacks is probably Canadian goose that you come upon and startle.
I always joke all the time with people when they're worried about this or that in the woods, or they'll say a black bear or this or that. I'm just like, there is nothing in these woods that is going to hurt you in terms of animals or what people are thinking. Obviously, anything can hurt you. We obviously get that. But I'm going on right with what you're saying. I joke that these are like the tamest wilderness ever. And like, there aren't these big, scary animals that are out there to get you in the least. You go to Florida and you get people just casually, nonchalantly tell you to watch out for alligators and snakes and, freaking wild boar. And you're like, where am I? I'm not at home anymore.
I know.
Whereas here it's like, man, whenever someone says, oh, I came across a black bear, I'm like, really? That's incredible. That's awesome. Yes, there's nowhere safer, it feels like, than the woods of the ADK. However, the mountains will kill you, and I'm a big believer in you if you disrespect them, you'll be put into your place. But I do not believe it is at the hand of the wildlife here in the Adirondack Park.
I agree.
And then my last question, why do you fish? Why do you spend time outdoors? What is it about it that brings you out there and keeps you coming back for more?
I just like the fresh air. I just like being outside. I think having nothing over my head is something. So I don't know. That's a good question. I'm toiling lots of times right now. You and I both have kids, and I don't have the time I used to have, and I'm a little bit melancholy because I have used my time poorly in regards to maybe when I was a little bit younger and I could have spent more time doing some of these adventures, because I'm a father and a husband, and I just cherish these times outside, whether it's alone or with my kids, because it's just nothing's forever. And if you have children and you have young children, it's busy. It's very busy. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also a nice excuse to, get outside with them and bring them with you when that allows. But even so, it's obviously definitely very different than, pre-family life in terms of the time that you have to go outside. But man, it really does turns your outdoors time from quantity to quality, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And I think you probably can relate. So this has been an awesome conversation. I could have a billion other questions for you, but I'm going to keep it nice and tame here to an hour. But Jordan, where can people find you online?
So my fly rod company is called JP Ross Fly Rod Company, and it's jprossflyrods.com. If you can't remember that, you can remember smallstreamflyfishing.com. Both of those will get to me. And I love talking to people. I do pick up the phone. All of our messages claim that we do like to talk to people the old-fashioned way. So email me, call me, whatever. I hope you want to get into fly fishing and small stream fly fishing. And we can make something for you.
All right. Well, Jordan, thanks so much for coming on the 46 of 46 podcast. It's been a great conversation with you, talking about conservation, fly fishing, the Adirondacks, and why you should care. The water is important, and fish are a huge part of that equation. It's been fantastic chatting with you. I hope you guys all check out his pages, JP Ross Fly Rods on Instagram and Trout Power org on Instagram and troutpower.org. Go check out his organization. And if you want to join, I highly recommend doing that. Support people who are doing great things for the Adirondack Park. This is why we're here. It's why you listen to this podcast, and it's why I do this podcast. So thanks for listening once again to the 46 of 46 podcast. Check out 46of46.com for more information on the podcast and other things that I can offer you. If you're looking for a guide or you want to read a book about hiking here in the High Peaks region of the Adirondack Park, that's a great resource to check out. Check back on Fridays for new mountains, new stories, new guests, and new episodes right here on the 46 of 46 podcast. If you like the show, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. But that will do it. Remember to always leave no trace. Do the rock walk, and if you carry it in, carry it out. See you on the trails, everybody.